Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellbite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I am finally going to be doing my Viego champion review. I really wanted to spend a lot of time on this champion to really get a sense for where he's at and what he does, because this character is just so weird and does so many interesting things, but I think I finally have enough to give my first impressions of where I think Viego is at. Now, first and foremost, I will say this champion is super fun to play. He's very reminiscent of sort of a combination of Yone, Master Yi, and Silas, being bursty but having good DPS, being a resetting team fight, just winner champion that if he's able to pop off in team fights will just carry the whole game, and Silas, where you sort of need additional champion knowledge in order to get the maximum amount of value out of this champion. Like, the biggest thing I think I really enjoy about Viego is that he requires players to have a sort of deep champion pool or good champion knowledge to succeed. Which is funny because this is like the first champion, I think, where it's not really possible to one-trick him. So like even Silas, you only have to know one ability and everyone knows what the champion's ultimates do, right? There's no real way to, mess that up. But Viego, you have to know the base kit of every champion in the game, because it's not even a once in a lifetime, okay, I'm going to press R, maybe half a dozen times in a game. This is, if I get any kills or assists, I'm taking someone's body and I'm using their champion for the next 12 seconds. And if I want to get maximum value, I need to be able to execute on that champion as well as I possibly can. So it's not possible to one-trick him because you need to know what a champion's base kit is. In this game, actually, I took a LeBlanc, and I've literally never played LeBlanc before in my life, as a matter of principle. But I was sort of like, oh crap, what do LeBlanc's buttons do? Because I had no idea. I'd never played her before. And that's the exact kind of thing that Viego is sort of good with, and something that I really think that you need to learn to do while you're playing him. And one of the things I think makes him super interesting as a character is that he does say, hey, if you know how to play characters super well, you'll be able to get a lot of value out of Viego because you have the ability to sort of look at an enemy champion's kit and say, hey, there's some value you can get here. In fact, actually here in a couple seconds, you'll see how I use the Camille E, which I know how to use that ability having played Camille, to follow the play and continue the fight when arguably I shouldn't have been able to do that. But either way, having good champion knowledge lets you make those insane plays to continue team fights, get additional immediate value, and then you can immediately hop out to continue onwards with the DPS train. And on top of that, the passive heal is really nice as well. It helps with the reset type playstyle that Viego has, but it's also not always beneficial to steal someone's body because you're immobilized while the channel happens. So even if you are untargetable, enemies can still set up on you like they can with something like Zhonya's Hourglass, for example, where, okay, yeah, you're standing right there. They know when you're going to pop out. They'll figure out what the timing is before too long, and then you're just kind of a sitting duck. So it's not always beneficial to grab a body, but I do think it's a good idea to do sort of sooner rather than later, I would say. Besides that, Viego's kit is actually pretty basic and self-explanatory. His Q is essentially Yasuo Q. There's not much else to say here. Unfortunately, there's no high note like Yasuo and Yone Q3 has with this ability, but it does guarantee effective damage against any target due to the passive. His squishiness doesn't really help him stay in fights against tanky targets very long, but it does mean that as long as he has the rest of his team helping him, he can really do a lot of damage very efficiently. And in fact, that is partially what makes Viego such a good jungler. He has a very healthy clear. This game, I did not get a leash at my first camp, and it didn't really matter. Viego has a ton of sustain because his Q can mark multiple enemies all at the same time, and then he can essentially auto-attack them, double-tapping each enemy in succession in order to keep himself topped up in the jungle, and it really allows him to have good, objective, secured, focused gameplay because of how fast he can take down things like Drake or Baron. It also doesn't proc on hit effects, which is kind of sad because it makes PTA clearly inferior to Conqueror, which I do think is probably the keystone you're going to use most often on Viego, but that's just, that's something that I think people are still sort of puzzling out and figuring out. His W is a bit wonky as well. Most charge abilities, you kind of want to charge up as much as you can get away with, but this one doesn't really give as much of a reward as other abilities do. The super low projectile speed makes it really tough to land and all but impossible at maximum range. Like, never go for a max range W on Viego. It's never gonna land because that projectile takes so long to travel. But either way, it's the sort of ability that you just want to quick tap, I think, as much as possible, and it's the way to go, I would say, in almost all situations. Viego's E is probably his best second max ability because that gives him really good steroids for farming, but also in order to sort of enable him in team fights, because it is sort of a way for him to drop aggro if he's running away from someone, kind of like how you would use a Kali W. But unfortunately, he doesn't feel much like an assassin. because he has super low mobility, his W can't go through walls, he can't drop aggro with his E because it's camouflage, it's not true invincibility, so Viego doesn't really have the ability to just disappear like a Kali and sort of thrive in fights. There are just a lot of things that I feel like he doesn't really contribute to that assassin gameplay because his abilities just don't coordinate that well. And that's kind of why I feel like he's a little bit like Yone, in that they're assassins with fairly limited mobility, but Viego's mobility is super, super limited. But I think it's because he has the option of sort of picking up mobility from other champions throughout the game and maybe being able to exploit that. It also means that it makes him hard. It makes it hard for him to find solo plays and set up on enemies. He's like Master Yi in that regard. He really needs the team setup to help him succeed, because if he doesn't have the team helping him and contributing and guaranteeing crowd control that Viego can then follow up on with his own damage and crowd control, he just can't really do that much on his own other than walk at you menacingly and maybe make sort of a mind game play with his E, which is a lot harder to do than you would think it is because of how difficult it is. The enemies can see the fog rolling and they say, okay, Viego's in the area, back off. And then you're sort of like, okay, cool, they backed off, they played it smart. And because of how slow your W travels, it's easy to dodge even a blind W from the fog because it's just pretty difficult to hit. And Viego's R, I really feel like, is a second fiddle to his passive, but it does do good damage and it can be reset in fights. It's also his only ability that goes through walls, so you can use it to jump through a wall if you're absolutely in need of an escape, and the cooldown is fairly low, so don't feel too bad about using it. You also get the constant resets whenever you possess a body. You just get Viego's R back, so he's able to press that button multiple times in teamfights or multiple times in skirmishes, which really allows him to get some more value out of Heartbreaker, where I feel like ordinarily it's not that good of an ability. So, in summation, I think he's really fun, but he really, really sucks when behind. Like all the champions I keep drawing comparisons to, like Yasuo, Yone, Master Yi, if they're behind, they just do absolutely nothing. And Viego is a very similar sort of champion. If he's behind, this champ is not doing a whole lot. He just really, really isn't, because of how his kit works. Like I said, he needs people to set him up, and if he doesn't have high damage, well, he's probably not doing a whole lot anyways. I think he trades okay in the early game. He sort of has the ability to make some plays happen, but he definitely needs to get his items in order to be highly effective. I think Blade of the Ruined King, hilariously enough, is actually probably his best early game item because of being able to proc those on hits twice, because of getting the Q damage and cooldown reduction going for him. Like, I really do think that that's probably the best idea, to go on Viego first and then go into probably one of the Noon Quiver items. I think you can go Kraken Slayer if you really want to just double down on the tank busting power, a ton of true damage, a ton of on-hit damage, but Shield Bow is probably going to be the best way to build Viego, as it synergizes with the lifesteal you're already getting from the Blade of the Ruined King. And in general, I feel like Viego is not going to be a champion we see very much in professional play. I just feel like he is very exploitable. I think that it's very hard to set this character up for success, and especially given that he doesn't have a lot of escape routes. He really is like Master Yi in that regard. So I feel like if we're in a metagame where Master Yi is playable, then Viego will be playable. But if we're not, I just don't think he's going to do that much. But either way, those are kind of my thoughts on Viego, the Ruined King. Let me know what you guys are thinking of him down in the comment section below. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, what you've been building on, and where you've been playing him. I've been playing him mostly in the jungle, but I know people have been seeing him in the top lane, seeing him in the mid lane. I feel like he's not going to be very effective in either of those two lanes in the future going forward, just because of his sort of lack of wave clear. Q doesn't do that much for him, and he doesn't, I think, trade well into a lot of bruisers because of how squishy he is, but that's just kind of me. Let me know if you guys have been playing it and what kind of success you've been finding. I would love to hear it. If you enjoyed that video today, go ahead and leave a like, guys. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.